Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060 with Pioneer Field Agronomist Allie Wise and Josh Schaffner. Here's Josh and Allie.
Good morning, Southeast Minnesota. It is episode 43. Josh, today is October 7th, so we're progressing into the month of October, and along with that, we're finally getting a nice stretch of weather, knock on wood, to start really rolling hard on some of these beans. It's nice to see some of those fields rolling off here pretty quick so that we can get moving on corn and hopefully just keep harvest in general moving in a positive way.
Yeah, we've got a great week of weather here, and soybean harvest progress. Allie, kind of a little bit to the east of the listing area here. It's hard to gauge. Soybeans are coming off so fast the first part of this week, but we might be knocking on the door of maybe a third or a better of the acres starting to come out. And looking at the forecast, if it holds up, I think as we get through the weekend into early next week, we'll have some growers wrapped up, some close to being wrapped up, and I anticipate to get back to corn. But yields, we mentioned last week, maybe exceeding expectations a little bit. I think that trend continues as harvest goes along. Allie, one thing that's come up in the beans a little bit, we talk, about disease, kind of talked about all summer long, and we talk about it in the off season too. One of the observations this fall, maybe a little different disease complex. We talk a lot about white mold in Southeast Minnesota, sudden death syndrome, something we talk about a lot, but maybe a little different things showing up across the area. Allie, why don't we just touch base on that a little bit?
Yeah, and you mentioned, maybe a little bit different, and that's not to say that we're not still seeing more of those randomized pockets of white mold and SDS here and there, but in general, a little bit of a different disease spectrum. And I think a lot of this has to do with, you just look at the environment that a lot of our soybean acres experienced this year. So that hot weather, especially hot and dry in some cases. And I think that's brought in a little bit more either charcoal rot or anthracnose or maybe some of the diseases that we're starting to see make a play on some of these beans. So it is important just to keep your eye on that, especially as you maybe start digging into a field where yields are a little bit off. Just some things that you might consider when soybean yields are maybe a touch off the mark. What have your observations been to the east, and do you agree with some of those factors maybe driving some of those differences we're seeing?
Yeah, very similar observations, and really what we're looking for if you're out there combining beans, and if you just see that the stems are really just littered with black lesions up and down the stem, that's kind of some of the first symptoms we're seeing. From there, it might be a little bit hard to identify the exact disease on that. In some cases, too, it might be just a little bit cosmetic. In some cases, it might be infected pretty good. But really, talking to, maybe reaching out to your Pioneer rep or one of us and really taking a look at that. In some cases, Allie, we're sending a few samples in just to confirm a couple of things here, because sometimes even the trained eye can be a little bit challenging to tell exactly what's going on. In some cases, too, where the beans might be leaning or maybe not standing as good, we're seeing a little bit more of that symptomology. In some cases, too, we're seeing it and maybe really not hurting yields, still seeing good yields out there. But overall, not going to be a devastating disease, but just some of the observations we've seen out there. On the corn side of it, Allie, we had a lot of growers plant some early corn early. You think about, just trying to spread out that workload and definitely coming off a challenging year last year. A lot of the early corn is just about wrapped up. Moisture's been pretty dry in the low 20s, good yields. However, we've had a lot of questions about that was dry, but the 9900 day is still really, really wet. And why don't we discuss that situation a little bit and maybe what led to that?
Yeah, and I'll be curious to get your opinion, but my take on that is that you look at some of those 99-day plus, when they hit black layer, that was kind of right when the majority of those hit black layer. That was kind of right as we entered those weeks when we were stalling a little bit. It was very hit and miss. We weren't picking up a lot of heat units. So I think they came into that stretch where they were just getting ready to rapidly drop moisture to that harvestable level. And they just didn't have the heat to push themselves along. But now you look at, like we mentioned, soybeans coming off in some really nice weather here. And it does seem that as we get back to corn, I think those moistures are going to be sitting in a really nice place. And you also look at, some of this corn, as folks have maybe dug into it, it's really holding on to that green color. And I think that maybe catches your eye sometimes. You feel that it's not as progressed as it should be, or maybe it's higher in moisture. But in a perfect world, we'd have a healthy plant like that at a harvestable moisture as we're coming through. What's maybe your take on some of those situations?
Pretty much exactly what's going on. We just hit that little cold blast and really damp stretch where we never got really any big rains out of all that when it was all said and done, but it just wasn't good corn drying weather. And a lot of times after October 5th, our corn drying days really start to taper off. However, this week's going to buck that trend, and we're going to take off a tremendous amount of moisture off this crop. And as guys wrap up beans and get back into the 100+ day maturities, I think they're going to be shocked at how much the moisture drops. I think in just Monday to Sunday of this week, I wouldn't be surprised to see 5-6 points or better even come off that. You think about Monday, how windy it was. We may be taking a 1.25 off the crop in general, but yeah, it's going to be really good if the weather holds up. Take advantage. Hopefully we can really get beans wrapped up, and I think we'll run into corn. And it could be a really nice opportunity here to have a harvest come out early and take advantage of it. Got nice soil conditions. If you're getting corn out, get the tillage done too in a good way. That's something we fought with, but we're just really in a great spot, Allie, with the way things are looking across the board. One other thing quick, Allie, for rapid segment 1, should I cut alfalfa late? That question came up. Our first advice is always no, we should not cut alfalfa late. However, if you need the feed, that is something we'll talk about here as we come into segment 2 and just clarify that here in just a couple minutes. Be sure to join back in after break.